Hi everyone, this is Accounting Nightmare, and this is Devil May Cry 5. The Devil May Cry series has an interesting history. It's been quite a while since the last main entry in the series, Devil May Cry 4. There was a reboot, but regardless of your feelings on that, a proper sequel to number 4 has been long awaited by fans. I'm happy to say that DMC5 brings back a lot of the core talent that makes the previous games so compelling. If you're a newcomer to the series, don't fear, this is a pretty good jumping in point. The story will be a bit harder to follow, there'll be characters you'll just be expected to be familiar with, but the story's not the main highlight of Devil May Cry games anyway. The gameplay is what's so good. And if you are familiar with the series, there's a lot of great nods and callbacks to previous games. There's some new depth added to existing characters, and there's some fantastic new characters, such as Nico, Griffin.
So you're an artist now, huh?
Yes, I am. Got any questions, little chicken?
And V.
Pardon my delay. I was catching up on some reading.
Yeah, looks like a real page turner.
It is a bit of a busy main cast, so Lady and Trish sadly get pretty underused, but overall it's a pretty fun experience. I won't be talking too much about the story, to be honest, because it's a fun ride, but it's not why you're here. The main event of this game is the gameplay, the action, and the combat. DMC5 features 3 different playable characters. You've got Nero, the newcomer from DMC4. You've got Dante, the legendary demon hunter, the series veteran. And you've got a newcomer, V. His origins are mysterious and pretty spoilery, so I won't talk about them. But his gameplay style, now that's interesting. Instead of direct combat like Nero and Dante, V uses demonic summons to fight for him. He does control the summons using his attack button and his shoot button, so they're not just AIs that play the game for you. And he does need to get into the combat himself sometimes to execute enemies. So essentially you're controlling 3 different characters. It's a very interesting style, very multitasking based, and it feels very different from other DMC characters. So I appreciate the variety. I wish he had a bit more moves to his moveset, but it is a very interesting style and I really enjoy playing it. Nero and Dante, meanwhile, are more standard Devil May Cry characters. You know, they slice things up with a sword, they shoot them with guns. They are quite different from each other though. Nero's moveset is smaller, easier to pick up, but he has a lot of depth to it because of his Exceed system, where you have to rev his sword while he's using it to power up your next attack. And he's got the new Devil Breaker system, where he has different arm attachments for his artificial arm, and they each do different things, so this gives him some much needed variety. Dante, meanwhile, has an enormous move pool. He's all about swapping between different options on the fly. He swaps between fighting styles, swaps between ranged weapons, and swaps between melee weapons. So he has an enormous amount of options. And he's a really fun character to just kind of make things up with as you go. This gives the game a lot of replayability because the 3 different characters feel so entirely different from each other, and they all have their own depth to learn, and it feels great to get better at with them. Speaking of replayability, there's a ton of different difficulty levels to try out, and if you really want to master the game, there's a lot of content there to do. DMC has always been a series that wants you to try out higher difficulties, slowly getting better as you go, and this game is no different. There's a lot of different things to unlock. You'll almost certainly not unlock all your abilities by the end of the first playthrough. They want you to do another playthrough, unlock more things, and learn new strategies for fighting enemies. Higher difficulty levels have different enemy layouts, introducing tougher things earlier, so it really helps mix things up. There's also the Bloody Palace mode, which is a survival mode, where you see how far you can go, and you can also just pick any floor you've unlocked to play, including boss fights, so you can just fire up the game and fight some bosses if you really want. There are some downsides to the game. A lot of the environment variety is not very good. It's kind of samey as you go through the game. It's missing the vibrant environments of DMC4, and there's also some long-ish load times, even if you're playing on a PC with an SSD. There's just kind of a lot of menus to go through and a lot of load screens to just jump into the game and play. The game does do a lot to improve problems with the previous games in the series though. One of the main problems of the series is the combat's always been great, but they keep throwing in strange platforming segments to try and mix things up, I guess, when the combat has always just been good enough to carry the game. And the platforming segments have always been not very fun. This game finally does away with that nonsense, and it just focuses on what it actually wants to be. I'm glad they finally did this in the series, because the combat is what these games really excel at. The combat system is really good. It feels fluid, it's fast, it gives you a lot of positive feedback when you're doing well, makes you really want to just get better at fighting different enemies so you can avoid damage on them, so you can find new ways to take them out. And it's got some really, really good boss fights to take on. It's a very pretty game in action. The music's really good, and the animations are fantastic. It's a game that's very cheesy, but it's very earnest about it. It's very sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's filled with fantastic little details and touches, like a secret ending if you can defeat bosses you're supposed to lose to. Overall, Devil May Cry 5 is an action game that knows what it wants to be and succeeds. It's fun to play, it's fast-paced, it looks cool, it feels cool to play, and it's very exciting and challenging if you turn up the difficulty. Or you can turn down the difficulty after a long, exhausting day at work and just blow up a bunch of demons. The choice is yours. I give Devil May Cry 5 5 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching.